Best Book Bits podcast brings you Stephani Grace, author of the book Creating Real Happiness A to Z, a mindful guide to discovering, loving, and accepting your true self. Stephani's also a professional counselor with 21 years of experience counseling individuals and couples using her unique blend of psychology and spirituality. She specializes in treatments of adults struggling with anxiety, depression, and weight loss. Stephani, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
No worries. Now, first question, who is Liv?
Oh, Liv is my daughter. Yeah, Olivia Grace. So she did the pictures in here, and I dedicated the book to her. Yeah, so that's my daughter. Yeah.
Also, my very close friends have a daughter named Liv, and she's 6, and she's just the sweetest little thing. So when you dedicated the book to Liv, I thought must be your daughter. Anyway, jumping in, I would normally ask the question to authors, talk about your background. Did you go to school? Where'd you go to college, and what did you do after that as well? But the book I read, which you wrote, which I know is coming out very soon, Creating Real Happiness, you start off with a punch in the face story, and it's called My Path to Self-Discovery and Acceptance. I'll just talk a little bit. You talk about your earliest memories of being alone. Can you do something a little bit different and do a book reading and read sort of page 1 or 2 for me and just tell us about this particular upbringing with your path to self-discovery and acceptance?
I would love to. Let's see. So here's my path to self-discovery and acceptance. My earliest memories are of being alone. I didn't have parents who were capable of loving me. My biological father was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and when I was 2 years old, he decided to leave my mother. This caused her to flee to Las Vegas and abandon my 2 older sisters and me, leaving us with my father and his new girlfriend, who would soon become his wife. I only saw my mother briefly 2 different times during the next 5 years. My dad and his new wife were deep into their addictions, so I endured a life of neglect and a lack of love. My 2 older sisters assumed the majority of my care, but they were not equipped to care for me as they were children themselves. They've told me they were haunted by my being alone in my crib, wailing for human contact that first year. This set the stage for me in terms of learning that my needs were not important and that I was not worthy of love or care. When my father's marriage dissolved 5 years later, I was handed off to my biological mother, whom I didn't know at all. Even though my stepmother hadn't been available or capable of caring for me, she had been the only mother I had known. Having her walk out of my life without a second glance was horribly painful to me, and it was the second abandonment from a mother figure that I experienced. I was heartbroken by that loss. I would soon come face to face with my mother's mental illness, and the remainder of my childhood would be wrought with confusion, mental abuse, and still more neglect.
Well, I'll stop you there because you go on talking about from, childhood with adults. But yeah, I read that and I've got a 1-year-old daughter, and I just pictured, like, wow, that was like a punch in the face for me as well. What do you feel reading that and looking back now on, we'll unpack how it all sort of unfolded for you as well, but what's your thoughts or feelings about those particular early memories?
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously done a lot of work on this, but it's still painful even to go back there and explore that. And, being a mother myself, it's so painful that, to have parents that couldn't give you the love and care, and to make you feel like, oh my goodness, you are so lovable and worthy, and we want to nurture and care and do all the fun things that, parents do, and that I was able to do for my daughter, So yeah, it's a hard piece, but I also feel grateful. I really do, in the sense that I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't be who I am. Who knows what would have happened had I had a different path, but I am just like so passionate and just like such a voracious seeker. And my life's calling is healing people and helping people to know that even if you come from a background like mine, it doesn't matter. You can still find true love within yourself. You can still be happy and successful and have everything that you desire and deserve. It doesn't matter how far you've come.
Some of the notes while reading the book really triggered for me was, you're an alchemist. You literally turn shit into sugar. You turned a shit situation, and reading on through the book and finishing the book, you're literally like a bit of an angel. Like, you're literally how you transformed. And I'll read on a little bit as well. So I'll read sort of the next part. You talk about coming from a childhood with adults who didn't know how to love themselves, let alone others, especially their children, left me feeling unlovable and empty. But you learn to get attention through achievement and by being really, really good. These elements would come to drive you. Find yourself looking for love in people who could not love you back and who were not available as well. This was become a cycle for you, which would confirm your beliefs about yourself, that your needs were not important and that you were unlovable. And because you spent most of the time alone as a child, you became terrified of being alone. But this is where it gets interesting. Ironically, in order to learn to love yourself, you had to learn to be alone with yourself. You did everything you can to avoid being alone. You got married young, and when the marriage failed, you took up drinking like it was your life purpose. I'd love to get into that as well. I literally just finished drinking alcohol for 22 years. I was drinking alcohol, not full time like it was my life's purpose, but I really have been 5 months on the wagon, so I nipped that in the bud. And it wasn't until you let go of drinking and you began to truly spend time with yourself that you realized that you've been afraid of who you were and that you didn't really know yourself at all. This is how my friendships with my true self became, which is great. We'll get into that. And slowly, one step at a time, you grew to love yourself. Through your self-discovery, you learned that you were indeed worthy of love and that your needs were most important. And the more you grew to love yourself, more other people were willing to love you as well. I can continue, but let's unpack that. What are your sort of reactions to what I just read through there? Is there anything you want to unpack or expand on?
Yeah, I mean, it is ironic, isn't it, in the sense of just like how, you know, developing a relationship with yourself is sort of the key to everything, and learning to love yourself, and being fearful of that, and that, that being the key. It's so interesting. And it's also interesting how we see what is in our conditioning. So it's like, even though I had people who wanted to love me and were willing to love me, I couldn't see them because I didn't think I was lovable or worthy of love. So, and until I understood that I was worthy and of love and lovable, then only could I see that and get it. It's almost a cruel thing that happens, isn't it? That we can't get it until we know it or have it.
Thank you for sharing and unpacking. Yeah, absolutely. I want to jump into sort of how you were drawn to spirituality your whole life and how you were vicariously reading spiritual books non-stops since your late teens. This is what I did. So from 19, I started to devouring books, and especially spirituality books, and I was on that train in that wagon early on, going back like 17 years, and I haven't stopped. It's just evolved. Can you talk about that and how that sort of unfolded with education on spirituality?
Yeah, I mean, I as early as I can remember, I mean, before I even left home to start reading, I just felt like I had this seeking within me of just such curiosity about spirituality. Like when I would go to school and I would learn that people like went to church or youth group, I would just be like, "Oh, can I come?" And I would ask questions. And then once I finally, left home and sort of had more control, I just was always picking up the latest book on some, Buddhism or spirituality or Wayne Dyer, who knows. It was just I was just so curious. And I think it was within me. I think in a way, my soul speaking to me about who my truth was, helping to guide me toward, what my reality really truly is. It was what helped me to begin to learn that what happened to me as a child and my conditioning wasn't my truth. So it was like my internal guide, moving me towards spirituality so I could learn my truth. I just had that within me, and that was my guide, really.
Yeah, and one thing that really spoke to me reading the book was talking about conditioning the ego, and especially your upbringing. A lot of people, once you dive into spirituality, they sort of try to teach you what the ego is, but it's basically a self-defense mechanism, and your ego would have been, defending yourself really young. So you would have seen the conditioning from your upbringing and how that shall, and then unpacking that and really going through. So spirituality isn't about adding things, it's about subtracting things and taking away those outer exteriors or those strong masks that we all carry around ourselves as well. So can you talk about sort of your experience on conditioning the ego, unpacking your past and how that transformed into finding your true self on the other side of it, and also the blessings of that is joy and happiness.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that is, I'm able to discover that on my own through, reading and meditating and all these things. And it is my life's mission to help people understand that the conditioning we get from the outside world, from our parents and society, isn't our truth. And, understanding that is our key to being happy, because if we're walking around thinking that the conditioning, the messages that we get from our parents and the world is our truth, and then it's really hard for us to be happy or believe or know what our truth actually is. And the thing is, we all are born knowing that we are lovable and worthy of love, and that we deserve exactly what we desire. But that gets covered up, like you were saying. It's like it's not gaining something, it's uncovering something. But what happens when our parents can't show up for us the way we need, for example, like mine, we can't help as children but think there's something wrong with us, or that we must be lacking in some way. And then, as you say, our ego develops to protect us. So it's like, okay, you better put that need away, you better act this way in this company, you better be really smart or do these things really well to get love and attention, right? And so it's like we get all these messages, and then we start acting in this way or believing in this way, and we think we have to be that way in order to be lovable or worthy. But really, it isn't true. And so, once we can understand that that isn't our truth, we can be free from that conditioning. That's how we can begin to feel, happy and at peace. But it is a lot of practice and work to get to there.
It's a lot of work, and the way I see it, or the way I've sort of came to label it recently, is what we call ego scripts and ego loops. So we find ourselves in these scripts or these daily loops, and if we look at it externally, like a doctor examining the patient, we can see, what is the true self? Like, what are you actually doing? Is in alignment with your values, your true self, or is it for ego satisfaction? Or ego is another word for past as well. Are you holding on to the past and not letting the future? The future's always there, and the reason we call it the future, because it's not yet, but the future's just that other door on the other side, and you can access the future straight away once you let go of the past, because you can walk into the unknown. So that's another ego script where we're scared or fearful as well. But dropping these labels and these scripts and these loops and walking into new loops, or creating or designing your loops as well. I find this all very fascinating as well, but it comes back to something you wrote in the book, and I'll just read it. You talk about getting to know your true self. You're born into a physical body as a non-physical being, which you may know as the soul or the highest self. And throughout the book, you refer to non-physical aspect of ourselves as our true self. And when you first entered the human body, you were aware of your true self. And we can see it in kids. Like, we can see this light. My 1-year-old daughter, watching her grow this year, has been crazy, because you can see that there's this angelic light about her. But you knew you were a divine perfection, and that you were nothing but love and goodness. But once the conditioning from the outside world begins, you start to lose touch with your true self. And this is where I think the ego forms, and this is the outer protection of the shell. Likely to begin to question your goodness, and then you felt unlovable, and that there was something wrong with you in some way. That makes sense. Is there anything you want to expand on that before?
No, but I just love how you brought up your daughter, and just how you can see it in kids before the conditioning comes in. Just how they're free to just be silly and expressing, what comes naturally to them. They're just laughing and enjoying life. And it's one of the things that I've found, like, the more enlightened or aware I become, the more childlike I become. It's like you just sort of become more able to just be free and enjoy like kids, right?
Absolutely, more spontaneous. And I'm a big kid at heart, so I've sort of never lost that as well. But I don't know if that's got to do with just never growing up like Peter Pan, or just getting into spirituality at a really young age and sort of doing my own thing and playing my own string. I like how you structured the book as well. So you talk about creating real happiness A to Z, and you literally go through A to Z of some of those practices. We'll start from number one. You talk about affirmation. Everything's an affirmation. What you choose to wear, eat, think, or buy is an affirmation of your inner self. For example, you're choosing clothing because it makes you feel good and celebrates your personality, or are you using it to hide yourself, believing that your body is shameful? Can you expand on affirmations for me?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what I'm saying is I think that, what are you affirming about yourself? What are you affirming about life? So it's like what you're, you know, what is happening internally gets expressed externally. And so I wanted people to begin thinking about what they want to affirm about themselves, what they want the world to know about about them, right? And so just kind of beginning to explore that if you want to be somebody that you know is expressing like joy and love, you want to think about how you're affirming that in life. Do your actions and choices in life match that? So if you're feeling that way, but then you're always focusing on what isn't working, or what you don't like, then that isn't going to be a match, right?
It's one of the things of just sort of growing older. The more you realize why you do, or why you've done things in the past maybe that you shouldn't have, or you look at the reasons, and that's another reason you can look to the future and say you can. There's no such thing as a stop. It's more of a not. There's no such thing as a brick wall. It's more of a corner. Take a left or take a right, and you can change the ways that you used to do things as well. This is why I find this all very fascinating. Jumping into the next A, there's a few A's there. You talk about appreciation and awareness as well, but appreciation, fill yourself up by being an appreciator of life, and awareness happens in the present moment, and always coming back to, they talk about the breath, or come back to the present moment. Present moment is all you've got, so just being present with that moment. I think that's the breakdown of the words. Is there anything you want to expand on, either appreciation or awareness?
Yeah, I mean, the awareness piece about being present is that's the only place we're actually free. Like you were talking about earlier, in the future, if we're worrying about the future, we're feeling anxious. If we're dwelling in the past, we're feeling depressed. And so we are truly free in the present. And when we're present, we're so much joy is to be had when we're just right there with what's happening, and we're not preoccupied by the future or the past. And then the appreciator piece, that is similar to what I was just talking about. It's remembering that what you think about becomes your reality. And so if you're focusing on what isn't working or what you don't like, that is what you're going to see. So if you shift toward what's working, what you're grateful for, what you want to have happen, then that shifts your outlook to feeling better and more positive, and opens you up to getting what it is that you want for yourself.
The shift is crazy. Like when you spoke about Wayne Dyer before, I studied Wayne Dyer for decades, and I love his books. You'll see it when you believe it, and all the other, dozens of books he's done as well, which is crazy. But we could do a whole episode just on Wayne Dyer's philosophy, which is great. About belief, the next one. So your beliefs shape your reality, which we all know. But one of the great notes I got from it was ego has a need for things to be evidence-based. When we are operating out of ego, it feels hard to believe in something that we can't actually see or prove in that moment as well. I just want to go on a quick tangent. So I'm actually in not the truth movement, but I've been interested in conspiracy theories for about 20 years, so longer than I have books. And I'm always interested when you actually present information to other people that might never heard something before. Their knee-jerk reaction is based off ego and their own belief, which not looking at the data. And I'm not held to beliefs. Once I understood beliefs, I really just dropped them. So I don't have a belief. I'm happy to be on all sides of the coin. But it's very interesting to see how people's ego holds up belief. And when you said about ego has a need for things to be evidence-based, on how we play out our life based on evidence, which is the past, and we don't think about things that we can't actually see or prove in that moment, which is what are we envisioning? What do we want from the future? Is there anything you want to expand on beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, here's one of the ways that I like to think about beliefs. It's like there's a lot of things we don't know, or we can't prove, right? And so it's sort of like, well, then why not believe what makes you feel the best? What resonates with you? What makes you feel, the most joy and peace? because it's like, really, when it comes down to it, that's what matters the most. It's not what anybody else thinks. It's about what makes you happy, and what creates the best life for you. And so I think cultivating beliefs that match that for you, that help you to have your highest best life, for you to be your highest best self, and to figure out what that means for you, not what it means for anything external.
That's right, yeah. And a lot of people think, spirituality and self development or self help or personal development is selfish, because it does start with self and personal. But until you're the very best version of yourself, or that you can be, you really can't create a circle of influence of positivity outside of you. And we can see this, the opposite is true. When someone's negative, they affect everyone in that negative cycle, from, parents, unfortunately bringing up unhealthy, negative kids because they're negative. But we can also see the opposite's true as well. But yeah, I do believe that everything starts with self. A little quote you put in the book as well, you talk about, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Is there anything you want to unpack on that before I jump into breathing?
Yeah, I mean, that is sort of talks of, kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, in terms of like my childhood, how it's like what you've been conditioned to believe is then what you see. Like, there was a time where I really, because I had been taught I was unlovable, then I really believed I was unlovable, right? It's that same thing in terms of, what we really, what is in our mind is what we will project out into the world. What will be, that will become our reality, our perception. And so we want to work with that, in terms of, if we don't like what we're seeing, then we can begin to explore, ooh, well, maybe I can begin to shift what's happening in my mind. Maybe I can begin to explore what's going on in there. And sometimes we might not know, and that's the place that you can start. You can start to, explore what's happening in there.
Best place to start is to get curious. So if you start to get curious on things, that's where real sort of magic begins as well. Jumping into breathing, the next in the A to Z. We're not going to go through all the Z because we'll be on here for a couple of hours, but breathing equals life. Can you give us a little tip on breathing?
Yeah, well, your breath can really ground you, and I always use that technique with my clients, where I have them put one hand on their heart and one hand on their belly, and the reason why I do that and why I teach that is, your own hands are very healing and comforting, and so just placing them on your body, just that alone can feel comforting and grounding. But then that gives you a way to bring your attention to your body. And then you can feel your chest rising and falling, which helps you to focus on your breath. You can feel your belly rising and falling. And so just taking a moment to, tune into your breath, tune into your body. And what it really does is it brings you back to the present moment, and it grounds you, and it brings you right here, right now, where you're free.
I've started to experiment with breathing the start of the year, and on a bit of a health kick with giving up the alcohol, and yeah, doing some Wim Hof breathing. You can actually change your state by just working with the breath, which is free, ever present, always there. It's just when you tune into it, especially the breath. Like, I've got some friends who do conscious breathing, and at the start it looks a little bit weird, but literally from breath can change everything. But before breath, the next one in C, you talk about consciousness. Who am I? Who is watching the one who asks, who am I? Consciousness means to be awake. And I like how you talk about, finding out your true self using consciousness, but always doing that without judgment or criticism. Can you talk a little bit about consciousness and, finding who your true self is without judgment or criticism?
Yeah, that happens, I believe, just by being willing to spend time with yourself. The more you spend time with yourself, and I think the best way is through meditation, but that's how we get to understand who's beyond our thoughts, who's beyond our thinking. And that I that is in there, that stillness is you. And my favorite thing to say, quote, is what would it like to be me without judgment? And that allows us to be humans here on this earth, exploring without it being right or wrong or good or bad. It's just like, we're just here experiencing life, and it doesn't have to, the only person that makes it like not okay or good or bad is our thinking. right? And so we can really free ourselves up to really love and accept ourselves if we're willing to just, allow ourselves to do it without judgment.
I don't know if you did it deliberately, but every letter or word that comes next in the category just sings from the next one as well. So, which is courage, C for courage. So you talk about, having the courage means to take small steps forward in spite of our fears. So talk about, the difference. We all experience fear, and courage is on the other side of fear as well. But I like to talk about walking through your fears and also working through your fears as well, because on the other side of fear is everything, and a lot of people need to push through. So, is there any experiences or anything you can talk about, or even clients you've worked with, where being able to use courage to transform their life a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like to tell people is that we understand the different kinds of fears. Like, we know if we're in danger or if the fear is about, just reaching our comfort zone. And so what I like to say is that if if it's that kind of fear, then we can shift our mindset and begin to get a little bit excited when we feel fear, because it means that we're pushing right up against our comfort zone, and it means that we're about ready to level up or grow in some way. And we have to remember that nobody who does anything great or fantastic does it without fear. So we're in great company. It's just like a normal thing that we have to teach ourselves to tolerate in order to reach the places that we want to be able to reach.
Yeah. And we will go through cycles in life where things will be easy and some things will be hard as well. But we have to consciously, again, get in touch with our consciousness, our breathing, and self awareness on seeing the roadblocks that we face, or those things that we can't even see because they're so close to us. Like in the coaching methodology, they talk about you can't see the end of your nose, or you can't see the picture when you're in the frame, so to speak. Similar to fears, we might have our fears. They're so close to us that we actually associate our personality with our fears. Like, oh, I'm scared of public speaking, or I can't do this. And there's such an inbuilt belief that other people can see clearly that these are just things you're holding on to. And really, courage is about facing these things, walking through them, working through them, and using self-love, acceptance, non-judgment to use courage to overcome them and get through it. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, that's just my take on it. Creativity. I love creativity. And you talk about Pablo Picasso's famous quote, which says, every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist once you grow up. The problem is how to remain an artist once he grows up. Is there anything you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I just feel like creativity is an important aspect of all of us, and we all have it. It's just, it's just unique for each of us. And I really feel it's an important aspect in terms of us having joy and not feeling like our lives are stagnant or boring. And so I think that it's just everyone recognizing that what is true for each of us is unique in terms of our creativity. And unfortunately, I think a lot of times our society and schools and things like that make people feel like being creative is very specific, like, oh, you have to be able to draw or paint, or it can be, you can be creative in so many ways. And so I encouraging people to explore the different ways in which they can be creative. It's like gardening, or I think I put down, and one of the ways in which I feel I'm very creative is just somebody who thinks outside the box. That's how I'm often very creative, is I come up with all kinds of interesting ideas to interesting problems, and that's creative. But I'm sure most people would think, in their mind, that it's like, oh, creativity has to do with art.
The thing is, a genius, we're all born a genius and we all squiggle outside the lines. Give a kid a pen, a text, and my kid draws on the whiteboard, but squiggle outside the line. But we get taught to write straight lines. We get taught to, curse, spell, and these things sort of box in our creativity. And by the time we reach 18 years of education, that we're all substandard. We're genius. You were all a genius behind the scenes, and what we have to do is spend the next 18 years unpacking that and realize that our genius has been suppressed. Anyway, I could do a whole podcast on that. But next one you talk about is Dharma. What is Dharma for people listening out there? It might sound like a Buddhist term, but what is your definition of Dharma?
it's like your purpose essentially, kind of like what your life's purpose is, a lot of time, like the work that you do for yourself, right? And it doesn't have to be, your life's purpose doesn't have to be the work that you do. I often think that we are our life's purpose, like finding our truest, highest, best self can be your life's work, right? And I think a lot of times people sort of get caught up in purpose and feeling like it has to be like their career and it has to be very specific. But I think that it can really, it's very unique and it varies from person to person. And I think it's based on what is true to you. Part of that, like we were talking about earlier, is getting to know your true self and being willing to trust and honor and follow that. But what happens is sometimes from our conditioning in society, we kind of get caught in feeling like we have to go a certain path, like we have to go to college, we have to get this job, we have to do it. But it doesn't necessarily have to look like that, right?
Correct, correct. It's so interesting that you say that we're so quick to judge others' lifestyles or plans, but we very rarely can actually authentically communicate our deepest life purpose and Dharma. I did a book summary yesterday on the Will to Meaning by Viktor Frankl, who put it all in very psychobabble terms, but it was basically like the will to meaning is, if you're questioning the will to meaning, that is the meaning. Meaning, like it's such just a paradox. But anyway, moving forward, talking about Wayne Dyer, one of the great chapters he wrote was Faith, and I have to read Wayne Dyer's quote: "If you knew who walked beside you at all times on the path that you have chosen, you would never experience fear or doubt again." Can you talk about faith for me?
Yeah. Well, what I believe is that I believe we are all divine. We are all connected, that, we are something way beyond our physical body. And I think if we can recognize this and accept this, then we understand the power of who we are, of what we're able to create, and how connected we all are. We can really appreciate that. But I think sometimes we get caught in thinking that we are just our physical body, and then that really limits us to that, and the ego.
Definitely. I think I like you talk about forgiveness is really all about you, and holding on to the feelings such as anger, resentment, and pain only hurts you. And it's about taking care of yourself by releasing these negative emotions. Talk a little bit about forgiveness, and especially, your upbringing, and, how you forgave. What were some of the tips or tricks or things that people can take away with? How do we forgive when we don't want to forgive? When you tell someone, "Oh, you need to forgive to let go of that," they're like, "No, not doing that." But how do we do that? Like, what's the process?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing that it often comes up with my clients, where people feel like when I say forgiveness, people feel resistance because they think that that means that if somebody abused them, or didn't show up in the way they wanted them or needed them to, that it means that it's okay. But it doesn't mean that. What forgiveness is about is freeing yourself up from the negative emotions that you're holding in your body. And so if we can shift forgiveness to be about you, about self love, about you being as happy and free as possible, then that makes it a little bit easier. But I mean, I think that one of the most important aspects of being able to forgive is first your own work. You have to first know that you are lovable and worthy, and accept yourself, because once we can do that, then it's easier for us to detach from other people. It's easier for us to understand that people's behavior isn't actually personal. So people show up the way that they do based on their conditioning and their life experiences. And so if we can understand that, then, and begin to understand that how they treat us or what they do isn't really about us or personal, even though I know it feels like it is. But until we know that we're lovable and worthy, then it's hard to feel like, well, if they loved me, or if I, all these things, then they wouldn't treat me that way. Or it's not about you. It's not because you're not lovable. It's not because you're not worthy. It's about them, right? And then we can go to the piece of sort of, empathizing or questioning. And I know this one's hard, but it's like, why do they show up that way? What was their childhood like? What was their experience like? Why do you think that they showed up for you in that way? Why couldn't they meet your needs? And that can sort of help people to understand who they are and why they couldn't show up. And then I think understanding it's not personal, that those are all aspects of forgiveness. And of course, this isn't something that's instantaneous, but those are kind of the steps, I think, for being able to forgive.
Thank you for explaining that. And a Hawaiian forgiveness ritual. I'm gonna stuff it up, so I'll let you stuff it up for you. What? How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, it's ho'oponopono.
Cool. And the simple steps is basically for forgiveness. You talk about I'm sorry, I forgive you, I love you, and thank you. Can you expand a little bit on this Hawaiian forgiveness ritual? I actually had Joe Vitale on the show recently, and he wrote a book about this particular thing. I haven't read the book, but I'm interested to hear what this is all about.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And it's so powerful. I don't know if you could even just feel in your body sort of kind of some peace or something when you said those words. I feel like it's so impactful. But I have my clients use this when they're working on self-forgiveness or forgiving another. You can really amp it up if say, for example, you are doing self-forgiveness, then do it in the mirror and look yourself in the eye, which is really powerful, and make sure that you're actually seeing yourself when you look yourself in the eye. But the different aspects are I'm sorry, and that is about I'm sorry that I caused you suffering or I caused another person suffering. So I'm sorry for the suffering that you endured. Um, Forgive me is about, please forgive me for the pain or the suffering that I caused you. And then I love you is like I love you unconditionally regardless. And so it's like if we're talking about self forgiveness, it's like I love you regardless of that what you've done before. And it could be to that, to if you're doing it for another person as well. And then thank you is sort of signifying that it's already out there in the world. This is taking effect. It's happening. It's sometimes people say, and so it is. It's kind of like that. Thank you. It's like acknowledging that this is going to happen.
It's also a ritual of letting go as well. Like forgiveness is all about just letting go of the baggage and what has happened in the past and moving on as well. Some of the last ones before we wrap up, because obviously we can be here for hours, but we'll sort of recap. I like the chapter you wrote about I am, which is, your conditioning has really created a lot I am not in your thinking. Can you talk about using the practices of I am? Like I am powerful beyond belief. I am defining myself. I am a holy expression. And what are some of these practices in regards to I am? What's it all about?
Yeah, I am is such a powerful statement. It's interestingly enough, it's the only name referred to as God in the Bible. I am is interesting. But I am is really a reflection of who you are, and it's really powerful. So you have to be really careful what words you put behind I am. And so, knowing how powerful it is, you can begin to monitor yourself and shift your ways of thinking. If you have been doing a lot of what you don't want, you can begin to shift it into what you do want. And so, like you said, if you've been focusing on how you're failing, you can shift it to I am successful, and I am strong, I am wise, whatever it is that you want to be true for yourself. It is a really powerful way to help yourself know that that is your truth.
Yeah, and we're all on the journey, and the journey is called yet. Like, you can't tell a child, like I asked my son yesterday, I took him to the park, and we sat down, he had a cookie, I had a coffee, we had a CC, and I said, what do you want to be when you're older? And he went, I want to be at the park. And because this is a beautiful concept, because they're just in the present, and this is about like I am here now, Dad, why are you thinking in the present? So it's just interesting learning from kids as well, asking silly things. But yeah, there's so much to take away from the power of I am. And probably the last one we'll wrap up on it, which is the scariest chapter of all. You talk about scarier than anything, which frightens me when I just read these two words. It's called mirror work. Mirror work. You talk about mirror work helps you see your true self and love yourself unconditionally, and you found it to be one of the most effective tools that you have used in your own life. What is it, and how can people sort of start now with mirror work? What's the first baby steps people can do, and what do we do when we look at ourselves in the mirror? What is this mirror work you talk about?
Yeah, it's so funny. I love placing bets with my clients. Like I love saying because it seems yes frightening and also weird, and I love just saying like, okay, if you're willing to do this for 2 weeks, I promise you're going to see a difference. If you do this every day for 2 weeks, I promise you. Let's make a bet. Okay, they'll make the bet with me, and then they come back and they're like, wow, this is amazing. This really works. So basically what it is you're taking time to truly look yourself in the eye and really see into your soul or your heart, and you look at yourself and you say, I love you, or you are worthy, or you are so lovable. You choose one that really resonates for you. Sometimes I have clients who can't say I, so they need to start with you because I feels too untrue to them or scary, and so they might start with you are so lovable. So something like that, and then if you want to try this at home, choose a statement that resonates for you. I would recommend something like I love you or you are so lovable, and say it 10 times in a row, looking yourself in the eyes. And if you want to amp it, you can do it at night as well, but only you only have to do it one time a day, and just do it for 10 times in a row. So you just look at yourself in the eye and you just say, you are so lovable. You are so lovable.
So I've just wrote a note down. I'm going to buy a mirror for my studio here because my wife would think I'm a bit weird if we're both getting ready in the morning in the ensuite where I'm looking in the mirror going, I love you, I love you, I love you. She'd be like, what is he doing? So I guess the first start is to get some privacy, okay? Or the back of your phone, I've got one which is just an ace of hearts, which just means I'm an ace and I work from my heart. Anyway, it's a little code thing. But getting maybe a mirror on the back of your phone as well, that would be a good one too. Yeah, that's just some of the tips I got from that. So I'm definitely going to buy myself a small little mirror and start this practice. I have a friend who's done this and he's talked about the power of it, but because he's a bit woo-woo, and everything he does is a bit woo-woo, you sort of put it, and this is the thing in life, we categorize and label people, oh, they're just woo-woo, or, oh, he's crazy, or he's nuts, or he's a bit different, but not actually get into the essence of what they do. And it's so, the light is so powerful that we sort of, we don't want to get next to it because we know how strong it is, and because it dissolves things as well. So this is so interesting about our life gets to a stage where the first half of our life is about getting, and then the other one's about shedding, a little bit like a snake. And it's like the more we learn, we're not learning things to grab onto, but we're learning things to unpack and shed. And I feel like this is where you go on with the book as well. So many other great things. So to my audience listening out there, definitely go out and buy the book. Look at everything about openness, pain, peace, practicing presence, quiet, receive, respect, self-love, trust, truth, unique, vacation, variety, voice, walking meditation. What is walking meditation? That's a good one. Let's stop on this one.
Yeah, walking. I love walking meditation. It's especially helpful for my clients who feel frightened when I ask them to begin meditating, because the nice thing about walking meditation is you're moving your body, so it's easier to quiet your mind. So basically you're meditating while at the same time walking. And so an example of walking meditation would be, okay, I'm going on a walk up the street. While I'm walking, I'm paying attention to how it feels as my feet move on the ground. I'm noticing the elements. Do I feel the wind on my face? Is it sprinkling? I'm noticing the bird sounds. And then, oh, here comes my mind talking to me about dinner. Oh, I'm back to focusing on the tree in front of me. So it's like you're meditating, but you're using your surroundings and you're moving your body, trying to quiet your mind by just focusing on being very, very present and experiencing the elements and the surroundings around you.
Got it, got it. So like a conscious meditation walk without the dog and without the big headphones like I do, and listening to a podcast and totally in my mind thinking I'm doing something outside as well. Got it, got it. And just the last one, which is really strange in the book, one of the chapters you talk about exo. What is this chapter about?
this is just about love, right? This is just about love. That love is the most important thing. That love is really what it's all about, right? And just that's really what that was about.
Awesome, awesome. Well, let's wrap it up there. Where can people find you, Stephanie? Where can they find the book as well? Connect with you personally and buy the book too.
Yeah, I have a website which is stephanigrace.com. And just a reminder, Stephanie doesn't have an E on the end, so it's just Stephani and then Grace, GRACE.com. And then my Instagram, you can find me just by searching for Stephani Grace with an I, no E. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'll push this out. Yeah, definitely recommend people listening to this to buy the book. It will change your life. A really cool guide. Reminds me of my book, Success in 50 Steps, how I broke, personal development down into these easy chapters. This really breaks down, the A to Z to happiness and through there too. So, Stephanie, thank you for being a guest on the Best Book Bits podcast, and we'll catch up again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun to talk with you.
No worries. It was a pleasure. Cheers.
Bye-bye.